How could the monk Zhao Mu have guessed that the person he dragged in with him was actually a woman? Since he had the letter from his elder martial brother, he naturally allowed Duan Tiandi to stay. When Qu Chuji found out about this, he came pursuing as well. He even spotted Li Ping in the back gardens of the temple. But by the time Hed burst into the temple, Duan Tiandi had already dragged Li Ping into the underground storage room with him. Qu Chuji, still thinking that Li Ping was in the temple, demanded that she be handed over. Since he saw her with his own eyes, he did not believe any answers that the monk Zhao Mu came up with, and their argument got worse and worse. As soon as Qu Chuji revealed a few his martial arts, the monk Zhao Mu knew absolutely he was no match. Having always been a good friend of the Seven Freaks, he set up a meeting with Qu Chuji in the pavilion of the Drunken Immortal. That huge vat that Qu Chuji had with him came from that very Fawa monastery. When he ran into the Jin soldiers in the pavilion of the Drunken Immortal, Qu Chuji's misunderstanding got even worse. The monk Zhao Mu really did not know much about the truth of the matter. On the way back to the Fawa monastery from the pavilion of the Drunken Immortal, he told the Seven Freaks about the two men that his martial brother Abbot Kumu sent to him. He added at the end, "I have heard that all of the 7 masters of Quanzhen sect are masters of martial arts, each receiving the direct teachings of Master Chongyang. Among them, Elder Cheng Chunzi was known as the best, and it turns out that he's as good as they say. Even though he's rather rude, he doesn't seem to be the kind who doesn't care for reason, and there aren't any enmities between the two of us. There must be some great misunderstanding at work here." Quan Jinfa suggested, "I think the best thing to do is to bring out the 2 men that your martial brother sent to you so we can sort this out." Monk Zhao Mu acknowledged, "Good point, I haven't really interrogated them very well yet." He was just about to send some people to go get Duan Tiandi when Kei Zhen'er spoke up that priest Qu Chuji's temper is really something, quite explosive. He obviously does not consider us people in the martial world south of the Yangtze as worthy of respect. His Quanzhen sect may be able to act like bosses up north, but we can't allow them to act like bosses when they come down south like this. If we can't clear up the misunderstanding, then we have to sort this out with martial arts. If we go up against him one-on-one, none of us are a match for him. But he didn't come here with good intentions." Zhu Chong added, "Let's gang up on him together." Han Baoju commented, 8 against 1? Not very heroic, don't you think? Quan Jinfa reasoned. "It's not like we are going to kill him, we are only trying to calm him down so he will listen to the monk Zhao Mu's explanation." Han Zhaoying was rather worried if it gets out that monk Zhao Mu and the 7 Freaks of the South ganged up on someone, won't that tarnish our name? The 8 of them hadn't worked out what to do yet when a thunderous noise came from the main hall of the temple, followed by the thundering of metal banging on metal. Qu Chuji was banging the huge bell that hung from the ceiling of the main hall with the bronze vat. After several hits, the vat began to crack. The look on his face was furious. The 7 Freaks didn't know that Qu Chuji wasn't always this rash and unreasonable. He had been so frustrated by his own inability to capture Duan Tiandi that he was about to lose control. That, added to his deep-seated hatred of Jin, led to his behaving this way. The 7 Freaks all thought that he was trying to bully them with his reputation, so they decided to fight it out. The more famous the 7 masters of Quanzhen were, the more determined the 7 Freaks were not to back down and appear to be bullied. If Qu Chuji had been some unknown martial arts practitioner, this situation would have, ironically, been much easier to resolve and probably already would have been. Han Baoju shouted, "Sister, let's take the lead." He was Han Zhaoying's first cousin on her father's side and, of the 7, had the least amount of patience. In one motion, the golden dragon whip that was around his waist was now in his hands and he swept a wind swirling the crippled cloud, causing the whip to snap toward Qu Chuji's right hand which was holding up the vat. Han Zhaoying unsheathed her sword as well and thrust toward the center of Qu Chuji's back. Attacked from both fronts, Qu Chuji rotated his wrist, causing the whip to hit the vat instead. Then he turned his body slightly sideways and let the sword pass by his side. In the last years of the Spring and Autumn era, the states Yue and Wu were mortal enemies. The king of the state of Yue, Gukan, in order to remind himself of the shame of defeat and to motivate himself to excel, tortured himself by sleeping on a straw bed and tasting every day a gallbladder that he hung from the ceiling. Nevertheless, the king of Wu had a general under him named Watsushi who, being a disciple of Sun Tzu's school of war, was a great tactician and trainer. Seeing that his army was still no match for his enemies, Gukan got more and more depressed. One day, a beautiful young girl with amazing sword skills suddenly appeared inside the Yue borders. Happy beyond words, Gukan immediately asked her to teach his soldiers her skills and was finally able to defeat the Wu army because of it. Jarxing, being the meeting place between the two states, was a place where several battles occurred. It was no surprise that the entire sword technique was passed down in this area. The only problem was that the sword skill was designed to be most effective on the battlefield. It was mostly used to chop down numerous soldiers and bringing down horses in a crowd. It was not nimble or agile enough when used against martial arts practitioners in the martial world. It was only in the last days of the Tang dynasty that this sword technique received a much-needed upgrade from a swordplay genius from this area. This sword master made the moves much more complex and speedier. Although Han Zhaoying hadn't yet mastered the entire repertoire that she learned from her master, she was still very deadly. Her nickname Yue Sword Maiden was a reference to this. After only a few moves, Qiuchuji had figured out her repertoire and decided to beat its speed with even more speed. She was fast, Qiuchuji was even faster. Using his right arm to block Han Baoyu's whip, his left hand came shooting out in an attempt to snatch the sword out of her hand by sheer force. In an instant, Han Zhaoying was forced to retreat to the side of the temple's statue of Buddha. Nan Shiren and Zhang Asheng charged in and attacked from both sides. Nan Shiren was just as quiet as can be and let his carrying stick make all the sounds. But Zhang Asheng was completely opposite, shouting and screaming all kinds of street talk and all in his South Yangtze accent. Qiuchuji didn't understand any of it, so he just pretended he didn't hear it. In the flurry of the fight, Qiuchuji's left palm suddenly came straight out right at Zhang Asheng's face. Instinctively, Zhang Asheng bent himself over backward to avoid it, but the move turned out to be a decoy. Qiuchuji's right foot came flying out hitting Zhang Asheng's right wrist, knocking his knife loose. But Zhang Asheng is much better with nothing in his hands, so he did not miss a beat as he balanced himself with his left leg, faked with a right hand, and attacked with his left fist. Qiuchuji let out a shout of approval before dodging out of the way and uttering pity, pity. Zhang Asheng had to ask what? Qiuchuji replied pity that you, such a martial arts expert, would bring on shame to yourself by befriending evil monks and serving jinn. Made furious by that accusation, Zhang Asheng shouted back, bastard Taoist, you are the one thought serving jinn. He took 3 swings at Qiuchuji in quick succession during that exchange. Qiuchuji dodged out of the way and tilted the vat, causing 2 of Zhang Asheng's punches to actually land on the vat. Seeing that they were still losing despite their 4-1 advantage, Zhu Chong made a gesture towards Quan Jinfa and the 2 of them charged into the scuffle. Quan Jinfa's weapon was a huge hand scale with which he used the scale handle as a bat, the scale hook as a flying hook, and the scale weight as a mace. Literally 3 weapons in one. Zhu Chong, on the other hand, excelled at hitting pressure points. That dirty and broken fan of his was actually made of iron which he used like an extension of his arm. This facilitated hitting pressure points and deflecting other weapons or enemies coming at him. Qiuchuji spun and tilted the vat in his right hand at will, making it a huge shield that guarded his front side while using his left hand to fight back and attack. With such a huge burden in his hand, he could no longer move around as nimbly as he should, but it was still quite advantageous for him because he could use the vat to block many of the attacks coming towards him. The monk Zhao Mu, seeing the fight quickly getting out of hand, figured that someone could be seriously hurt any moment now. He tried to get everyone's attention by shouting as loud as he could. "Everyone, please stop. Please listen to what I have to say." But who would actually stop in the middle of a fierce fight? Kyuchuji shouted back. "Hypocrite. Who wants to hear you talk? Watch this." Suddenly his left hand turned ferociously towards Zhang Asheng as it shifted between fist and palm over and over again without rhyme or reason. This move, called Flying Mountain Outside the Heavens, was based on strange form and incredible speed, and was meant to take an opponent by surprise, as it did Zhang Asheng. Monk Jiamu shouted, "No! Reverend! Please don't!" Kyuchuji had been fighting for so long and against so many able opponents that he was afraid that the fight would last too long. Since there were two men standing on the sidelines waiting to jump in at any moment, he was worried very much about his own life. Now that he had found an opening in his opponent's defense, how could he just let it go? Therefore he put all his strength and power behind this move. In his martial arts training, he trained his body specifically to strengthen the toughness of his skin. The fact that he liked to wrestle with wild bulls and buffaloes for work and as a hobby, Zhang Asheng's body was covered with a layer of thick and hard muscles, which resembled the thick skin of bulls. Even though he knew that this strike packed quite a force, and since he figured that he couldn't get out of the way, he immediately gathered his inner strength and prepared himself for a strike on his shoulder and shouted, "Come on!" Hence, he caught the palm full on. Crack. Incredibly, his collarbone, despite all his preparation, snapped under the pure inner force of the Quanzhen sect. Shocked, Zhu Chong attacked aggressively with his iron fan, aiming right at a pressure point on Kyuchuji. As the saying goes, the offense is the best defense. Zhu Chong attacked to protect his sworn brother from further harm now that he was injured. But Kyuchuji, having just gained the upper hand, immediately began trying to seize some of the weapons that were flying around him. "Aiyo!" Quan Jinfa shouted as Kyuchuji got a hold of his scale. With a jerk, Kyuchuji pulled him a meter closer. This put him between Q and the two other attackers, Nan Shiren and Zhu Chong. Kyuchuji's left palm flew toward Quan Jinfa's scalp. Han Baozhu and Han Zhaoying both immediately jumped in and thrust their weapons at Kyuchuji's head in an attempt to stop him. Kyuchuji had no choice but to dodge out of the way and let Quan Jinfa escape. Having just escaped death, Quan Jinfa was covered in sweat. Nevertheless, he took a kick to his side that made him writhe on the ground in pain, unable to get up. The monk Jiamu didn't want to actually come to blows. Hed hoped that his misunderstanding with Kyuchuji would have been peacefully worked out by now. Seeing the friends that had come to his aid were going down one by one, he had to join in the scuffle. He tossed his long sleeve, raised the piece of burnt wood in his hand, and lunged at Kyuchuji. Kyuchuji thought, so it seems that this monk is a master at hitting pressure points. He put up his guard against him. Kazhener figured from all the shouting that his sworn brothers and sister were hurt, so he grabbed his iron staff and was about to charge into the fight when Quan Jinfa shouted, "Big brother, fire your projectiles. First at Jin, then go for Zhao Go." Before his voice even died down, two projectiles flew directly toward Kyuchuji's forehead and right hip. Kyuchuji was shocked. It's not often that one meets a blind man able to fire projectiles so accurately, even with a person on the side telling him where to fire them. He immediately spun the vat in his hand and knocked the two projectiles down. These projectiles are used only by Kazhener, and had corners on all four sides like a diamond, but as sharp anyone could make them. He learned to use them after he was blinded because the projectiles were heavy, making it easy for him to be accurate. After knocking the projectiles down with the vat, Kyuchuji actually felt the vat shake. He thought, amazing, what strength. By now all the other freaks had dodged out of the way. Quan Jinfa still kept shouting, "Zhongfu, now lie." Good, now the Taoist has moved into Mingyi. He had done this with Kei so many times over the years that it almost seemed as if his eyes were Kei. He was the only one among freaks that could do this. Kei was firing as if he could see, and in an instant, he had fired dozens of projectiles. So many that Kyuchuji was now forced to fend off the projectiles with no opportunity to fight back whatsoever. Suddenly a thought came to Kei as hearing the sixth brother as well, so has prepared every time, no wonder I can't hit him. Quan Jinfa's voice was getting softer and softer with moans sandwiched in between, obviously in great pain. Kei did not hear Zhang Asheng make a single noise at all, and nobody was quite sure whether or not he was alive. Quan Jinfa struggled to get out. Hit Tongren. But this time Kei did not follow his advice. Instead he threw up both arms and fired 4 projectiles, one each at the Ji and Sun positions right of Tongren and the other 2 heading for the Feng and Lai position left of Tongren. Not expecting Kei to suddenly use trickery, Kyuchuji took a big step left and dodged the Tongren position as 2 people suddenly screamed in pain. Kyuchuji's right shoulder was hit, but the projectile aimed towards the Sun position hit Han Xiaoying's back. Surprised and pleased, Kei shouted, "Little sister, come here." Knowing that her big brother coated his projectiles with a virulent poison, Han Xiaoying immediately scrambled to his side. Kei took out a small, yellow-colored pill from his bag, stuffed it in her mouth, and instructed, "Go to the yard outside and sleep. Do not move, I'll come and attend to you later." Han Xiaoying immediately got up and ran towards the yard. But Kei shouted, "Don't run. Don't run. Walk slowly." Han Xiaoying immediately understood and cursed at herself for being so stupid. Because her blood will circulate faster when she ran, and if the poison was carried into the heart, there would be no way she could be saved. She stopped and slowly walked out. After being hit, Kyuchuji just ignored it because it was not very painful and just kept on fighting against the rest of the group. However, in the midst of the fight he suddenly heard Kei shout, "Don't run," several times. A chill went through his heart as he suddenly noticed that his arm around the wound felt very numb. He realized that the projectile had poison on it. Not daring to hesitate, he collected his strength and aimed a punch at Nanshi Ren's face as hard as he could. Noticing that the punch coming his way, Nanshi Ren bent his knees, held his iron-carrying stick across his chest, and pulled a move called Iron Chain across the river to block the punch. Kyuchuji did not pull the punch at all. On the contrary, he actually took a deep breath and put even more force into the punch, hitting the stick squarely in the middle. Nanshi Ren's body shook violently and he had to drop his stick as a part of his hand between his thumb and index fingers split open and blood began rushing out. As it turns out, Kyuchuji wasn't keeping anything in reserve in an attempt to bring the fight to a speedy end so he could save his own life. He pretty much put everything he had into this punch, causing massive internal injuries to Nanshi Ren. Feeling weak on his feet, numbness in his mouth as well as seeing stars, Nanshi Ren suddenly fell to the floor throwing up blood. Although he had taken down another foe, the numbness in Kyuchuji's shoulder was getting worse and worse, causing him to start having trouble controlling that huge vat in his hand. So with a shout, he swept his left leg, making Han Baoju leave his feet to dodge the attack. "Where do you think you are going?" Kyuchuji yelled as he pushed the vat off so that it came down on top of Han Baoju. Because he was in midair, Han Baoju could not do a thing other than doing a half flip. By then the vat had already covered his head. In an attempt to avoid any serious injuries, he immediately put his hands over his head and curled up into a ball. Bang! The vat hit the floor and conveniently and neatly covered up Han Baoju. As soon as he let go of the vat, Kyuchuji unsheathed his sword. With a little kick against the ground with his toes, he jumped up and cut the rope that held the huge bell to the ceiling. At the same time, he gave the bell a little push to aim the bell directly at the vat, making it come down right on top of the vat. Now Han Baoju was truly stuck. However, Kyuchuji had really expended a huge amount of energy with these last 2 moves, and as a result, All of his extremities were beginning to feel numb and huge drops of perspiration were beginning to bead on his forehead. Zhen'er shouted, "Drop your weapons and stop now. If you wait any longer, your life could be in danger." But Chuji figured that since the monk was in league with both Jin and the Song soldiers and hid women in his temple, then his friends, the freaks, could not be anything better. He would rather die than to submit to these bastards. So he turned around and began to try and fight his way out. With only Zhen'er and Zhu Chong still unharmed and the condition of the others still unknown, how could either one of them let him get away? So Zhen'er held up his iron staff and stood in front of the door, blocking his way out. Desperate to get out any way he could, Chuji stuck his sword out right at Zhen'er's face. Zhen'er's nickname Flying Bat soaring through the sky came about for a reason, so he easily heard what was going on and parried the sword with his staff, almost knocking the sword out of Chuji's hand. Shocked, Chuji said to himself, "How strong is this blind man's inner strength? Could it possibly be stronger than mine?" He immediately followed with another thrust, which was parried again. But Chuji had found out that it wasn't because Zhen'er's inner strength was stronger, it was because his right arm was wounded and therefore he could not exert his full force through it. He switched the sword over to his left hand and began using a skill that Hed never used in combat before, swordsmanship of common demise. The sword flashed as one move after another came flying towards the vitals of Zhen'er, Zhu Chong, and the monk Zhao Mu. He wasn't defending at all, every single one of his moves was an attack. The name swordsmanship of common demise was designed for a person to fight for his life against a much more powerful opponent. Every move is designed to attack the enemy in a vital spot with incredible force and without the slightest care for one's own life. Although this is a highly refined sword skill, it's actually very similar to those scraps between ruffians and the lowlifes of the streets. As it turns out, the Quanzhen sect is a nemesis that resides in the western regions. This man was much more powerful than any of the 7 masters of Quanzhen, and he was as ruthless as he was powerful. At one time only the disciples' master could subdue and control this man, but now that the master had passed away, there was a chance that this man could come back to the Central Plains at any time and destroy the entire Quanzhen sect. The 7 masters of Quanzhen to have a Big Dipper formation that could contain this man. However, this formation only works with all 7 disciples present. There was a possibility that they might run into this man without everyone being present. This swordsmanship of common demise was meant to be used against this man, especially in single combat, in the hopes that the 2 combatants would both perish and thus preserve the sect. Poisoned and surrounded by 3 martial arts masters, Chuji had no choice but to use this skill. After about a dozen exchanges or so, Zhen'er's leg was hit. Monk Zhao Mu shouted, "Big brother K, brother Zhu, why don't we just let him go on his way?" But because of this little distraction, his right rib was hit, causing him to fall to the ground screaming. By now, Chuji was having trouble keeping his balance as well. His eyes were bloodshot. Zhu Chong exchanged several more moves with him, all the while cursing at him non-stop. Zhen'er, not being able to see, was completely baffled by the sound created by Chuji's sword and was hit again, this time on his right leg, and he fell to the ground. Zhu Chong cursed. "Dog of a Taoist, bastard Taoist. The poison in your veins has reached your heart by now. Why don't you try and make 3 more moves with me?" Furious, Chuji simply came charging at him, but Zhu Chong's lightness martial arts were very good and he flew around the hall. Knowing that he could not keep this up any longer, Chuji stopped and sighed. Suddenly everything turned dark in front of him. He tried to shake his mind clear and was just about to look for a way out when suddenly something smacked his back. It was a shoe that Zhu Chong had taken off. Even though the shoe was soft, it still carried quite a bit of force with it because of Zhu Chong's inner strength. Chuji teetered as he fought hard to maintain consciousness. Suddenly something else hit the back of his head. This time it was a wooden fish Muyu that Zhu Chong had found lying in front of the Buddha statue. Fortunately, Qiu Chuji's inner strength was very strong. A normal person would have undoubtedly died from that hit, but he did almost black out from it. Qiu Chuji yelled at the top of his lungs. Forget it, forget it. Chung Chunzi Qiu Chuji shall die today at the hands of these shameless bastards. Feeling his knees suddenly give away, he collapsed onto the floor. Fearing that he might jump back up again, Zhu Chong reached down to hit the pressure point in the middle of Qiu Chuji's chest when he suddenly saw Qiu Chuji's left hand move. Knowing that he was in trouble, Zhu Chong immediately tried to bring his right arm back in front of his chest to block the blow. But a huge force came up from below his belly and shot him away. He was spitting out blood even before he landed. Even though he could not move, Qiu Chuji had put all the strength left in him into this strike. There was no way in the world that Zhu Chong could take such a force. None of the other monks in the temple knew any martial arts. In fact, none of them even knew that their master knew martial arts. The sudden chaos in the main hall had sent them fleeing for their lives a long time ago. Only after things had quieted down for quite a while did a couple of the braver monks stick their heads out to see what had happened. What they saw was blood everywhere, bodies everywhere. This sent them screaming and scrambling to Duan Tiandi. Duan Tiandi had been hiding in the underground storage room the entire time and was ecstatic on hearing the news that both sides were completely destroyed in the fight. Making sure that Qiu Chuji was among those fighting, he told the monks to go and check whether or not the Taoist had died. Only after the monks came back with the news that the Taoist was lying on the floor with his eyes shut did he finally feel safe and dragged leaping to the main hall. He gave Qiu Chuji a kick, causing Qiu Chuji to let out an almost imperceptible moan. Duan Tiandi pulled out his saber and shouted, "Do you have any idea how much suffering you have caused me, O Taoist bastard? Well, now your foe is going to send you on your way to the Western Paradise." Even though he was greatly injured, Monk Jiamu summoned all his strength and shouted, Don't harm him." Duan Tiandi asked why not. Monk Jiamu, still recovering from the shout, got out between breaths. "Is a good man just a little impatient, so there was some misunderstand." Duan Tiandi replied. "A good man? Who cares? Let me kill him." The monk Jiamu angrily rebuked. "Are you going to listen to me or not? Put down your saber." Duan Tiandi laughed heartily at that remark and shouted back. "Put down my saber? Then what? Become enlightened on the spot?" He lifted up his saber and began to swing it down at Qiu Chuji. Furious, the monk Jiamu summoned up all his strength again and tossed the piece of burnt wood in his hand at Duan Tiandi as hard as he could. Duan Tiandi tried to dodge out of the way, but his martial arts were just not good enough and it caught him on the side of his mouth and knocked out 3 of his teeth. In pain and humiliated, Duan Tiandi, ignoring the fact that he owed his life to the monk Jiamu, lifted his saber and tried to chop off the monk's head. However, a small monk who was right beside him grabbed onto his right arm and held on for his life while another one grabbed his collar. In fury, Duan Tiandi swung his saber back and brought it down upon those 2 monks. Even though Qiu Chuji, Jiamu, and freaks were all martial arts masters, every single one of them was gravely injured or kept from the battle and could not do a thing to stop him. Leaping screamed, "Bastard! Stop! Stop!" She had been dragged all over the place by Duan Tiandi and had been patiently waiting for an opportunity to present itself to her to avenge her husband. Seeing the ground covered in blood and this man about to commit more murders, she could not hold back any longer. She charged up to him and began to fight him for all she's worth. The others had thought she was just an underling of Duan Tiandi because of her uniform. Everyone was quite surprised when she suddenly attacked Duan Tiandi. Being blind, Kei Zhener's hearing was especially sensitive and knew that she was female as soon as he heard her. He turned to Jiamu. "Monk Jiamu, we are all going to die because of you. You really did have a girl hidden in your temple." After a moment of surprise, the monk Jiangmu understood what had happened. He thought that because of one slight oversight on his part, he had not only got himself hurt, he had taken his friends down with him as well. In anger and humiliation, he punched the ground with both hands to help him stand up and charged at Duan Tiandi with all his might. Seeing him coming with such ferociousness, Duan Tiandi immediately dodged out of the way in fear. Not being able to control his own body because of the injury, the monk Jiangmu ran straight into one of the temple's columns headfirst and died on the spot. Frightened out of his wits, Duan Tiandi grabbed Li Ping and ran off as fast as he could. Li Ping's shouts for help got further and further away,